are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, which is entitled Best Practice Purchase to Pay. We're going to be taking a look at what we consider to be one of the best practice solutions out there for P2P solutions, and this is a solution that we've worked with for a long time here at Eclipse, and that's the P2P solution from Proactis. So very quickly, my name is Richard Hughes. I'm Director of Technology and Services here at Eclipse Computing, and this webinar was organized by Emma Mitchell. I'll put these contact details up again at the end of the session, and if you've got any questions, we'll be going through those at the end, and of course after the webinar you can reach us on these telephone numbers and these email addresses. So just quickly, a look at the agenda for this afternoon. So having completed the introductions, before we dive into the product and the P2P solution itself, we'll just talk a little bit about what we actually mean by purchase to pay or P2P, and certainly how that relates to the Proactis solution, but just more generally, what are some of the goals of a best practice purchase to pay solution? What are some of the challenges we see out there in the marketplace at the moment, or certainly within our customer base as well? And we'll talk a little bit about, generally, again, in general terms, how how technology can help, the benefits of having a P2P system versus having nothing. Having done that, we'll take a look at the Proactis solution in a little bit more detail. We'll just talk about how it fits together, how the P2P solution fits into the wider Proactis portfolio, and then we'll move along and we'll take a look at the P2P solution, the P2P products in detail, and we'll examine some of the key processes within that product. And we'll then summarize very quickly at the end, just to sort of recap some of the potential benefits for an organization of implementing a purchase-to-pay solution. And then, as I said a second ago, what we'll do at the end is we'll have a Q&A session where if you have any questions about anything I've talked about or I've shown you during the session, Emma will open up the telephone lines and we'll address any questions you may have. Okay, so very briefly, what do we mean by purchase to pay, or what are we talking about when we look at purchase to pay? Well, for the purposes of this session, there's two areas really that we need to examine. One is purchasing, and the other is invoicing. So if we think about purchasing and the purchasing process within an organization, if we're looking to put in place some best practices, these are some of the things that we really need to consider. So if we have or we want to put in a system to address purchasing and procurement needs, it needs to be something that's easy to use. We need to make it easy for people to get to what they need, because as we'll see, potentially a system like a P2P system is something that reaches right across the organization and can touch many different areas of the business. So we want to make it something that anybody can pick up and get to grips with very quickly. So it needs to be easy to use and easy for people to find whatever it is that needs to be requested or ordered. We of course want to ensure compliance, so whether that's compliance with internal policies, regulations, whether that's compliance in terms of coding of orders and invoices, whether it's compliance with contracts and agreements we have in place, making sure we're using preferred suppliers. We want to be able to enforce that in the product itself, but at the same time it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be dynamic, and it needs to be something that is very light touch. Key to the purchasing process as well is obviously every organization, most organizations have a degree of budget management in place. Certainly everybody hopefully has budgets, but if those budgets are not controlled and checked against in real time in tandem in the purchasing process, then any P2P system, if it's not really connected to the financials, then again it's not really as effective as it could be, and it's certainly not best practice. So we want something that can enable effective budget management and can reach out and look at the financial data in real time so that we can make sure that we're not going to be spending over budget, whether that's within a department or within a particular cost center or whatever that budget structure may be. So we need something that can do that. And we also need to be able to reduce somehow the actual cost, the tangible and the hidden costs of accounts payable. And finally, we need to have a system that enables greater visibility. If we have a system in place, it needs to be a system that is transparent and enables visibility in terms of spend categories, being able to analyze where we're spending our money. So if we, it's all very well having a system that can generate a purchase order, but if we've got no ability to capture the detailed history for what it is we're purchasing, who are our biggest suppliers, where is that money going, what are the projects that are incurring the greatest expenditure, if there's no mechanism for being able to review that, then again, it's not really, it's not a complete system in our view, and it's again something we would hope a best practice purchase-to-pay system would have. So the second area then is invoicing, because the other end of the process it certainly relates to financials and invoice processing, and again there are a few things that we hope or consider a best practice purchase-to-pay system should be able to address. So ultimately, we want to ensure that suppliers get paid on time, but also that they get paid correctly and we're paying the correct invoices. So we need to have, again, proper cost allocations in place. We want to eliminate the possibility of duplicate invoices coming in, paying the same people twice, not paying the correct amounts, not matching the correct invoices against the correct orders, all of those kinds of things, which taken together, they are some of the hidden costs of processing invoices, or some of the hidden costs of accounts payable and invoice management. And overall, we want to reduce the purchase costs, and we also want to, again, some of the things we talked about before, be able to track against budgets, and taken together, hopefully all of these things can lead us, as we'll see towards the end when we recap the benefits, lead us towards being able to strengthen supplier relationships, having a system that's transparent and visible, minimize audit time, and reduce the the number of queries, time spent looking for information within the system. So these are some of the things, not all of the things, but certainly some of the key things that hopefully a purchase-to-pay system can address. Or these are certainly some of the things that we would try to achieve if we were implementing a purchase-to-pay system. In terms of where it fits, so we talked about Proactis being certainly an end-to-end solution. So Proactis as a company, they're 100% focused on spend control and e-procurement, and what we're going to be looking at this afternoon is everything that you can see on the right-hand side of this diagram, the red area, so purchase to pay. So these are the things we just talked about, purchasing, invoicing, invoice processing. There's also an employee expenses module in there. We're not going to be looking at that today, but we will be running other webinars on some of these other modules. But this diagram is really just so you can get an understanding, or just to confirm really that Proactis is an end-to-end solution. It's part of a wider suite of products, but for the discussion this afternoon we're going to be focusing purely on the right-hand side, the purchase to pay. And as I said, what these two things, or two key areas of the Proactis suite taken together do is they represent a complete end-to-end solution. So there are some other products related to source to contract, which is to do with contract management, sourcing and tendering, supplier engagement. They integrate seamlessly with P2P, and those two things can be implemented in isolation, but taken together they represent a complete end-to-end solution. So that's what we're saying with this diagram here. And in terms of where a P2P solution and where the Proactis P2P solution fits within the organization, we mentioned at the beginning, potentially this is something that can touch lots of different areas of the organization, if not all of different areas of the organization. So obviously we're going to have employees involved in the ordering process or the request process, depending on how that's configured. we may need to get end users involved in the process for resolving invoice discrepancies. If something, an invoice has come in but the goods haven't been delivered, there are price variances. We're going to be looking, or we're going to be, touching, managers within the organisations, through approvals, approval of, requests, orders, invoices potentially. And we may also, if there is a procurement department, we're certainly going to need their involvement in, getting this or putting the best practice solution in place. So, they would be, the buyers, category experts. Invoice processing, of course, that's going to touch, some people within the finance department, within accounts payable. But one element that's often forgotten is the suppliers themselves. We also need to engage with the suppliers to make sure, we've got the correct information. We're going to, engage with them, dynamically. We want to be able to get things, communicate with them electronically. We want to be able to get orders out electronically. Potentially, we can have invoices coming in from suppliers electronically. So, again, one of the elements that's often left out is that, engagement with suppliers, and we really want to include them in the process of implementing a purchase-to-pay system. So these are the people who are directly involved. Indirectly, or certainly to a lesser extent, we may also have other people within the business, other managers, either in finance or in procurement, who may need to be involved in the the day-to-day operation of a purchase-to-pay system. And of course, again, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but some of the challenges and some of the things that we need to address when putting in place a purchase-to-pay system. Some of those different groups of people, these are some of the things that we've sort of come across, and certainly these are issues that are issues that need to be addressed, and these are issues that we hear either from clients or quite often when we go out and talk to people in meetings. A lot of these things come up, but these are also things that we want to be able to address some of these things by implementing a best practice purchase-to-pay system. So this relates back to our goals that we talked about at the beginning of the session. If we look at some of these challenges, these are the things that historically have been perhaps problematic within purchase-to-pay systems. The ability not to be able to just go into a system, buy things online like you do at home. There's no visibility. Nobody knows which suppliers we have discounts with. So if that's, we have agreements in place but they're not visible, then these are the things that we need to address. So if the process itself is time-consuming, complicated, we're not going to get people engaged, and we're not going to get people using the system. So we need to have a system that encourages an easy, simple process. From a management perspective as well, there may be a number of challenges, and there may be resistance to implementing purchase-to-pay systems, perhaps for some of these reasons. If one of the other things we come across quite often is that where somebody has attempted to implement an ordering system or a purchasing system, but it's just simply been the way it's been implemented has not been optimal. It's been made more complicated than it needs to be, and that again leads to some of these kinds of challenges. Too many unnecessary requests. It's hard to focus on making the right decision. Again, it comes down to visibility. I can't get a handle on my current budget position because that information is not available at the time of authorizing an order or a request. So these are some of the things, just from those different groups of people within the organization. These are some of the challenges that often come up, and these are some of the things that we need to address by implementing a purchase-to-pay system properly. And certainly, we believe at Eclipse that the Proactis solution can address all of these different challenges. So if we do that, if we implement a purchase-to-pay system, or if we don't implement a purchase-to-pay system, then certainly the impact of all of those challenges, or the reasons behind those challenges, the impact on the organization is going to be quite significant, and it's going to be significant in a number of different areas. It's going to be significant in terms of costs to the organization. It's going to be significant in terms of increased risk. It's going to be significant in terms of employee satisfaction or lack of satisfaction, and it's going to be again significant in terms of lack of visibility, lack of transparency within the purchasing and invoicing processes, and ultimately that will again have a knock-on effect with our supplier relationships. Not putting something like this in place, can lead to issues such as late payment, lost invoices, duplicate invoices, all of these kinds of things. So these are the things to think about when you think about, well, what's the cost of implementing a purchase-to-pay system? Well, what's the flip side of that is what is the cost to the organization of not doing it? So these are again some of the things that we need to think about as a reason for hopefully putting in place some best practice processes. And technology is there to help, and technology can certainly help us. And technology has come a long way, and certainly purchase-to-pay systems have come a long way, even in the last 5-6 years. And the Proactis product itself has developed significantly over the last last 6-7 years. So technology can help us, and it can help us address all of those different challenges that we talked about, and it can help us put in place some of the goals that we talked about at the beginning. Information, making things easy to find. We can use things like searchable catalogs. We want to have easy-to-use systems that are web-based. We want to have budget and financial information visible at all times, visible to managers when they're authorizing invoices or orders. It can help us with the automation of repetitive tasks. It can help us put in place the business rules, but help us manage those easily, and help us put in place a proper infrastructure and framework for making sure that we comply. And again, give us, certainly in terms of the way the information is organized within the system, it can allow us, again, through the reporting tools and the analytics dashboards, it can give us that detailed spend visibility that will allow us to make better decisions, more informed decisions about who we're working with in terms of suppliers, where we're putting contracts in place. It allows us to make better decisions going forward by analyzing all of the information that we have within the system. Okay, so that's probably enough theory. So why don't we have a look at the Proactis solution itself, and we'll talk about some of the key processes within the P2P system or within the Proactis P2P solution, and we'll go through some of those sample processes. We'll go through some of those processes in the product itself. Okay, so again, this is really just sort of things to bear in mind. So what we're looking at here, these are sort of 3 areas that we're aiming to improve. So this is 3 areas in which we hope to introduce some improvement by implementing a system such as P2P. So if we start off just looking at what are the processes, the spend processes within a purchase-to-pay systems. So within the Proactis solution, there are a number of different areas. If we think back to that diagram a few minutes ago, but for the for this particular part of the solution suite, the Purchase-to-Pay solution, we're going to be concentrating on these processes that we've highlighted here in light blue. So this is putting in a request, approving a request, purchase orders, the receipt of goods and services, invoicing, and then ultimately passing those transactions across automatically into the finance system for payment. But underlying those processes, we need to have some key foundations in place, and this is really the building blocks that the system is based upon. So that is information pertaining to the suppliers, data relating to catalogs, items, order templates, communications, or how do we communicate with suppliers, being able to email out purchase orders automatically. We talked about receiving invoices electronically. So there's an infrastructure underneath that's in place within the product that allows us to carry out all of these processes more efficiently. Okay, so the first thing we need to think about is again, this works slightly differently in some organizations, but whether it's a requisition process or whether we're placing draft purchase orders directly, there's a process in place which may start with a request, it may start with an order, but there's a document that needs to be created. We need to be able to give people the ability to find whatever it is that needs to be requested or ordered easily. That needs to be able to be created very quickly, submitted for approval, approved, and then when the goods are received, we need a mechanism for processing that receipt quickly and efficiently. So again, just to recap, I guess. So this is how Proactis implements that purchasing process. So we start off with the ability to search and select whatever it is we're looking for. So if it's new laptops, or if it's for stationery, cleaning supplies, or catering equipment, whatever it may be, we need a mechanism to allow people to search and select that information quickly. Depending on the items or the type of expenditure that we're carrying out, we want to be able to default as much information as possible. We want to eliminate things like manual coding of orders or invoices. So what the system allows us to do is to automatically code things up depending on the type of item, or depending on the order template that's been selected, or the request template, or whatever it is. We want to be able to default as much of that information as possible up front, so that when that gets carried through the system later on, it's already present on documents, i.e. invoices, further down the line. So we're saving time further down the line by defaulting as much of that coding information up front. If applicable, we want to be able to, we talked about checking the budget. It's no good having a budget in place within the finance system if the first time you find out that somebody has actually incurred some expenditures when the invoice comes in. You want to be able to check against that budget in real time. So as we'll see, Proactis gives us the ability to do that. So we can check against budgets in real time, and assuming we're okay to go ahead, we're going to submit that document, route it around the organization electronically, of course, for approval. Document gets authorized. That will result in a purchase order, which then gets sent to the supplier electronically. We receive the goods and services, or if they're not in an acceptable condition, we may reject them. And ultimately that then leads us through to the invoice matching process. So the invoice comes in, and that's as much as possible automatically matched against the order and the goods receipt. So that's the process in Proactis. So I'll just walk you through a couple of the examples of that within the system. We'll skip that. I mean, this is really just sort of saying the same thing. We're just sort of tying it back to some of those goals and some of those key things that we talked about at the beginning. Okay, so in terms of a system, there's a couple I'll just walk you through on the slides here. Then I'll show you another example in the live product in a second. So Proactis, I mentioned already, it's 100% web-based from an end-user perspective. So we want it to be something that people can pick up very quickly. Zero training, as it says here, for people who actually need to just raise a request or place a draft purchase order. It should be something that's really intuitive, easy to use. So we give people, this is in the a draft purchase order, where we give people the ability to search for information anywhere within the system. So if you want to search for something to order or something to request, you can do that straight from your homepage. So you can search in this case for temporary staff. It'll give us a list of all of the items related to temporary staff and whatever the prices are that have been agreed, and who the different suppliers are for those items. And these can be any kind of expenditure. It doesn't have to be the fact that we've got these defined within the system as items. It doesn't have to be a a physical commodity item. Proactis is equally adept at dealing with services, and whether that's legal services, could be consultancy, whatever. We can configure services and process the ordering and receiving of services just as easily as we can physical items, because quite often when you talk about purchase orders, people have a kind of preconception that you're going to be dealing with inventory items or physical boxes of widgets that are going to be arriving in a depot somewhere, and that's not the case, certainly not these days. And just because the fact that your business may spend a lot of money on services, that's still something that needs to be controlled, and Proactis is a very good system for doing that. So as we talked about, we wanted to make it easy. We just want to be able to add items to our basket. So if somebody's just searching for something, an item to request or order, they just want to be able to select that from a list, add it to a basket, maybe edit a couple of things. So we're not necessarily showing them all the detail here, just the things that they need to be able to edit. So maybe they just want to change the quantity. So we want to minimize the time spent on admin and processing. All of this is being coded automatically in the background, and then once that's submitted, that would then go off for authorization according to the relevant workflow that we've got in place. So just as a very very quick example in the product itself, we've just flip across into here, and I'll just give you another example. Let's just So again, just logged in as a user called Natalie. Natalie is somebody who's purely placing orders and requests. She maybe wants to put in an order for some let's have a look, legal advice. So got a template set up. So we've got a template that's set up specifically for legal advice and services, and because we only have one preferred supplier for legal advice and services, we can see that that's actually already been defaulted onto the header of the purchase order. So Chancellor Solicitors is our preferred place to go for legal advice. So if we just have a look in there, we can see that the items that come up are purely items related to legal advice and services, and these would be items that are linked to that specific supplier. So having selected that template, we want to be able to enforce those rules, enforce compliance. So by selecting the correct template, we're already automatically guiding people in the right direction in terms of what can be ordered, but also as they're doing that, we're going to be defaulting a lot of the information in terms of coding and account codes in the background. So same concept here. We've got a list of items. If we want to get some advice on commercial property, we can just add that to the basket, drop that into the draft purchase order, maybe change the description. So I'm just going to say advice regarding the office lease, whatever. 120 pounds, probably a bit optimistic, but we can see there we've got some nominal information that's been defaulted already. So the cost center, that's being defaulted from the department. So because Natalie is part of the marketing department, cost center is defaulted, and the activity, or the the expense account in this case, 1840, we can see that's also been defaulted and is non-editable. That's been defaulted based on the fact that we selected that particular legal services item. So all of this information in the background is being defaulted, but in terms of Natalie, all she needs to do is add that item to the order, submit the order, and then that's gone off for authorization. So we can see the PO is valid, been submitted, but we're not going to get a PO number until it's been authorized. So she can have a quick look. We can see that's gone off, and that's with the head of marketing, because Natalie is in the marketing department. This particular route, particular workflow needs to go to the head of marketing first. So he would need to authorize that, and then the purchasing manager would also need to authorize that. But you can see here from the authorization summary, again, what it's about is we're making all of this visible to everybody. There's complete visibility at every stage in the process. So everything we do with any document is fully audited, and we have a full audit trail for everything that happens within the system. Every comment, everything that anybody does, any amendments to an order, anything gets deleted or added, all of that is tracked, and that is stored in the audit trail for that document. Another example, we may have some we talked about having contracts in place. One of the things we can do with Proactis, we want to make sure that those contracts are visible. So if we have a contract in place, it's all very well having a contract in place with Hewlett-Packard for purchasing laptops, but if the details of that contract are not made visible to the people placing the orders, then there's not a great deal of value in having that contract in place in the first place if we're not able to enforce that through the purchasing system. So if I do another purchase order, maybe have a look at the standard laptop there, we can see that as soon as I add that to this order, we can see that that's linked to a contract. If I want to maybe bring up some details relating to that contract, we can see there, get a bit of information about the contract, any transactions, attachments, any transactions that have already been placed against that contract, any other attachments, maybe some copy of the contract or ordering terms and conditions that need to be, additional documentation that needs to be submitted when placing this order. So we can make the contract visible at the time of ordering. That's what we're saying here. So the goal is to make ordering easy, and we want to make that very easy. So we talked about we can do goods, we can do services, we can do contract items. One of the other things we can do is we can even punch out to external catalogs. So this would be, for example, a supplier, let's say stationery supplier, Office Depot. We have the ability from within Proactis to punch out directly to that supplier's website. So we can actually go into their website exactly as you would maybe on Amazon, or go onto the Office Depot website, select a bunch of items from their website, add those to the basket on their website, go through the checkout process, except that when you hit checkout on their website, it then drops all of those items straight into a purchase order with all of the prices, descriptions, quantities already correctly filled in, and you can then submit that straight from within the Proactis P2P system. So it's very flexible in terms of what we can do with regards to ordering different types of goods and service. So we looked at searching and selecting information, and we looked at coding things automatically, and routing an order for approval. Now, in terms of approvals, again, we said that Proactis is very flexible. We have the ability to create potentially very complex workflow rules, but these can be created very quickly, and then they're also very easy to maintain. This is something that doesn't require any sort of developer level knowledge to maintain and implement these workflow rules. This is something that the customer themselves can maintain once the system is up and running. At every point in the approval process, we're also using email notifications. We don't want to have to wait for somebody to log into the system, of course, to find out that they've got something to deal with. We're going to notify them via email to let them know that they've got an order or an invoice to authorize. We can actually also have them approve that order directly from within their emails, just directly from their inbox. They don't even have to log into the system to carry out that approval. They can respond to an email template. They can respond to the approval notification directly, maybe using a keyword in the subject line. They respond. That goes back into Proactis. That email is then picked up, and it automatically approves that document without them ever having to log in. That's very useful, of course, if they're out of the office. Maybe all they have access to is email on a PDA or a telephone. So people can approve documents directly just by responding to an email with a keyword and a secret code. We do also have a full-blown approver app for people, for approvers and managers. So if there's, you want to get a little bit more detail, you can actually use the mobile app for approving orders, invoices, and expense claims. And of course, there's all of the usual things, escalations, stand-in authorizers. So if somebody goes away, we automatically assign we can assign a stand-in authorizer, so any documents that would have gone to that particular person for authorization are automatically routed to somebody else. Likewise, we can have escalations, so if somebody doesn't authorize a document within the given time frame, that can again be escalated, automatically routed to their manager or their superior or somebody else or an alternative authorizer. And we can configure authorizations to run in parallel or in serial or both, and they can be based on the value of the order, the ordering department. It can be based on a combination of the nominal coding, the project code, or it could be the type of item that's being authorized. We can use all of those different kinds of things when configuring the workflow. And in terms of processing the authorization process, again, it's very straightforward. If you're doing this within the system, you have, as you can see here, task list. You can log in as an authorizer, so review all of the documents you need to deal with. So we could see that maybe that order from Natalie, somebody goes in, views the details, and they get an overview of whatever it is that's being ordered. And here, this is where we can check the budget. So we talked about being able to check the budget in real time. We can do that either at the time of placing the order, or we can do that again as an authorizer, somebody reviewing this. So we can actually, as this graphic shows, what this is actually doing behind the scenes is this is linking in real time to the general ledger system underneath. And if we have budgets stored in that, that finance or ERP system, we can read that budget in real time. So we can see what has been the what was the budget for this, this combination of account codes, what's the amount that's already been spent, looking in the GL again, what's the amount that's currently committed, i.e. what's the amount of orders outstanding in Proactis which have not yet been invoiced, and what is the value of this particular order, and is that going to take us over budget or not. So we can check that very quickly graphically, as you can see here. So when somebody's either raising an order or approving an order, they've got that financial visibility as well. And it's simply a case of if they want to approve the order, they can very quickly approve it or reject it, authorize it with a comment. And there's talked about the Approver app on the iPhone there, so just an example of that. That's what that would look like to somebody using that. So depending, again, how their role is configured in the system, they may have access to one or more of these icons, so the ability to approve orders, expense claims, standalone invoices. And if they drilled into the orders, again, they'd get a list of all of those orders that they needed to authorize. They can go into one of those in more detail, take a look at the value of the order, who submitted the order, and a summary of the items within that order. And again, look at the account codes. They can see any coding on there. And if they're happy with it or not happy with it, you can see down the bottom they've got approve and reject. They can very quickly deal with that document directly from their mobile device. Placing the order, again, we want that to be as quick and as efficient as possible. So there's a couple of different options we have there for submitting orders. The most common, of course, is via email. And we can, of course, still print out a PO, send it via PDF. But ideally, we want to be using some kind of electronic form of communication with our suppliers. So at the simplest level, we can just email the orders directly from within Proactis, so we can email out the PDOs, so the POs as PDF attachments straight from within the system. Taking that to the next level, what we can configure for some suppliers, again, depending on the sort of the back-end systems they have in place on their side, we can actually transmit the order directly to them as XML, and this is one we use again quite often with the the stationary suppliers or the big IT suppliers, Dell, Hewlett-Packard, those guys. What you can do is you can actually submit the order directly as XML, which means it'll go straight into their sales order system on their side and create a sales order directly within their system. So you don't even need to email the document to them. You can actually transmit that straight into their back-end system. And if you want to print it out, as we said, we can do that. Okay, so we'll skip the the receiving stage, but suffice to say, there's a process for receiving goods and services, and it's very straightforward. We can drill into that in another session, but just in the interests of time, let's just move on very quickly and talk about invoicing and matching. So again, with Proactis, we're aiming to streamline the invoicing and matching processing. So if we have a look at this here, essentially there's there's a couple of things to talk about on this particular diagram. So firstly, this first box over here on the left, what we're saying is that there's two ways, or two main ways, that we can get invoices into Proactis. One, we've obviously got paper invoices and they can be input into the system. The second way is we can have electronic invoices, so that could either be invoices coming in again as XML files, or we can scan invoices and then we can process the scanned invoice documents to create an invoice within the system. So there's different methods of getting the invoice into the system in the first place. And then once it's in Proactis, we generally distinguish between two distinct types of invoice. So we have PO-related invoices, so invoices that are linked to an order, and they will go through the what is really at the heart of the Proactis P2P system, the three-way match. So the three-way match is the match, of course, between the invoice, the order, and the goods receipt. So when an invoice is submitted in Proactis, the system will automatically try and match the invoice. If you tell it which order it relates to, it'll then match that as much as possible. But if any discrepancies are generated, they will then the system will generate what's called an invoice discrepancy, and then that, depending on the type of discrepancy, again can be routed electronically to somebody to deal with. So whether it's a price variance, quantity variance, maybe there's an additional delivery charge, something that needs to be dealt with, we can record that, and again we can make sure that that's something that's visible, transparent, and auditable. So if there are discrepancies, we make it very clear what those discrepancies were and what action was taken to resolve those discrepancies. And then once we've dealt with any discrepancies, or if the invoice is fully matched against the order, then we would release the invoice for payment, and then that gets, of course, sent across automatically into your finance system. And Proactis integrates really with any finance system. We're flexible in terms of the way we can integrate that, and we've certainly integrated it here at Eclipse with a number of different ERP and finance systems. Second, the bottom half of that diagram, the second type of invoice that we can deal with within Proactis is what we would call a standalone invoice or a direct invoice. So this is an invoice that's not related to a purchase order. So an example of this would be utility bills, so maybe electricity, water, telecommunications, so bill from the phone companies. And again, we can take those in as scanned documents. We can have them input manually. We can import the XML directly. But again, the idea being that we get a invoice into Proactis, but we want to be able to code and allocate that as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Optionally, we can put some workflow approval on there. So if it's if it's an invoice not related to a purchase order, you may want to have some kind of approval or control process on there. Again, you want to make that visible. You want to make sure you're complying, but you can also use that again as an opportunity to make sure you're not going to go over budget. So again, with standalone invoices, we can view that budget information held in the finance system in real time. So even if it's something like a telephone bill or an invoice that was we just get an invoice from somebody that we weren't expecting, we can see at a glance what the impact on the budget for that project or for that cost center department is going to be. And again, once we've dealt with that, we've coded the invoice up, it's been approved, whatever, we can again generate the accounting entries for the finance system automatically and then pass that through. Very quick example of an invoice, live example, just to prove that it does actually exist. So let's just log in, different user, lady called Nicole. So you can see here, we've got a number of options I talked about for for processing in invoices, whether it's a scanned image, whether we're maybe got some electronic invoices that have come in automatically. So we've got ones that have come in from Intercontinental Hotels in this case, and we can see, because that came in as an XML invoice, we can view the details of that. But it may just be that we want to register an invoice and link that to a purchase order. So very quickly, let's just have a look. So let's just have a look what we've got in here. So this is invoice for Office Depot. So we can just say, yep, that's the order that this invoice relates to. It's the 30th of the 9th, 2014. Supplier invoice number is this. Gross value was that. Tax value was that. Have a look. That's the confirmation of the value that Proactis is expecting based on the value of the order we said this invoice relates to, and surprise, surprise, it's the same. But if there was an issue here, if we change the price, that would generate an invoice price discrepancy. But let's just quickly keep it simple, pass this through, submit the invoice. So you can see I didn't have to code anything there because I linked the invoice to the order. As soon as I did that, then it's automatically going to load all of the account code information from the items on the order. I don't need to rekey that into the invoice. Everything is copied from the order straight onto the invoice. So if you want to have a look at that, you can see there's the one we just did. Office supplies released for payment, and all of the the nominal information was already on there. Okay, so that was a very very quick example of a couple of key processes within Proactis P2P. As I said, we're going to be we run regular webinars on this and the other modules, of course, within Proactis, and within those sessions, we delve into the product itself in a lot more detail. But really, just to sort of recap this afternoon's webinar, let's just talk about some of the potential benefits. So, a couple of areas in which we think this can have real benefit for an organization. Firstly, in the form of, I guess, real hard savings, costs. All of these things, this is, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but it's making sure, we're actually, we are putting in place, what we call spend control. So we're making sure there are no unnecessary purchases by giving access or categorizing the spend correctly, making sure we've got the correct order template set up, making sure that only the relevant people have access to order certain types of goods and services, only certain people can access the certain types of order templates. We can make sure we can put those controls in place, we can make sure we're compliant, we can avoid any unnecessary spend. We can make things like contracts visible. We can make sure that we are using the correct suppliers. So as we saw there, when I selected the legal advice template, if we've got a preferred supplier for legal advice, we've got a preferred supplier for stationery, then as soon as somebody selects a stationery order type, you want to have that information filled in automatically. So you're enforcing that policy. You're making sure that we are using the preferred supplier for stationery, for legal services. And if there's a contract in place, you're making that contract visible at the time of ordering. Overall, by defaulting, a lot of the coding, we want to reduce the time spent, actually creating and submitting orders, and as a knock-on effect, when those things come through into accounts payable, because all of that stuff has already been coded up, automatically, at the time of ordering. Maybe a couple of things got changed along the way during the authorization process, but by the time it actually hits the finance system, all of that information, once an invoice has been fully approved and released for payment, that's gone into the finance system automatically. So we're reducing the time spent entering invoices, keying in invoices. And because we're doing this hopefully in real time, we're also reducing the actual overall cycle in terms of the purchase to pay cycle. So we're actually reducing the time spent getting from somebody requesting something to the invoice coming through into the GL and payment being made. So we're, by shortening the time spent searching for information to actually put onto the order in the first place, by sending the order out electronically, we're making sure it gets to the supplier quicker, and by making the process for receiving the goods quick and easy to use, we're reducing time spent there. And by using techniques such as electronic invoicing, scanning of invoices, even just as we did there, just entering an invoice and linking it to a purchase order, just the fact that we can make sure that gets coded up again automatically. We're reducing the time spent in a number of different areas, but taken together we're reducing the time spent on the entire purchase to pay cycle, so that again that can have knock-on effects in terms of reduced time, reduced time in terms of the getting payments out to suppliers, making sure only the correct information gets sent. We're not paying the same invoices multiple times. We can avoid things like late payment fees, and we may even have the ability to benefit from discounts by improving our relationship with the supplier by paying in a more timely fashion. And by making all of that visible, making sure we have a system that's transparent and fully auditable, we can even reduce things on reduce time spent when audits come around. And then from a strategic perspective as well, there are also a number of things that a really good purchase to pay system will allow us to do. So overall, we're obviously going to have greater financial control and visibility. We're going to avoid the risk of we can track which suppliers are performing, which ones are not complying with our policies. And by having all of that information available for reporting, the data for the spend analysis, I said before, that's going to allow us to make better decisions, better strategic decisions going forward. Where should we be, focusing our efforts, as an organization, as a finance department, as a procurement department, where should we be, putting our efforts, which are the relationships with the suppliers we really need to maintain, because they're the ones that, our organization is really heavily dependent on. If we don't have that information, available at the touch of at our fingertips in terms of, reporting KPIs, things we can easily see, graphically, if we don't have that information to hand, then we're not going to be able to make those strategic decisions going forward. And then some of the soft, or I guess less tangible benefits. The fact that we've got an easy to use system. The fact that we're spending less time on repetitive tasks like keying in invoices. Hopefully that can lead to I wouldn't say a happier workforce, but we can certainly make people's lives a little bit better in terms of how they're using the systems. Okay, so I think it's probably a good time at that point to ask Emma to open up the lines to see if we've got any questions that we can deal with in the Q&A session. So ran a little bit over there, so apologies for that. But what I'll ask Emma to do now is open up the telephone line, so if there are any questions, we can take those and deal with any questions if you've got them, Emma.
Thank you, Richard. Please can anyone let me know if you have any questions, either by raising your hand or by typing a question in on your keypad. Thanks. No questions so far, Richard.
Okay. Okay, so what I'll do is, I said at the top of the session, if you do have any questions, of course, these are our contact details. So if you want to speak to me or speak to Emma, or drop us an email, you can do that. Drop us an email at those addresses, or of course call us on either of those telephone numbers.
A question has come in, Richard, from Chris. He would like to know if there's an alert for budget headroom.
Okay, yeah, so certainly alerts, we have the ability, so by default, we don't have an email alert. I don't think, I'll have to check, it may have changed in the latest version, but certainly email alerts, we have email alerts for lots of different events within the system, so not just when you've got something to authorize, but when an invoice has been received, when your order has been delivered, all of those kinds of things. But we also have the ability to create custom email alerts for any event within the system. So for something like budget headroom, when we basically, that budget check graph that you see, there's some configuration obviously that goes behind that, and as part of that configuration we could also get the system to generate an email to be able to notify a budget holder that it's gone over budget by X amount. So out of the box it doesn't do that, but it's pretty straightforward to configure is the answer. One of the other things you can do on the budget checking, as well as obviously just showing the information, you can also actually stop people from, if you're doing the budget check at the time of ordering, as well as displaying the budget information, you're going to, if it does go over budget, it'll actually display, it will display by default, a banner on the screen warning the person who's placing that order, or warning the authorizer that that is going to go over budget. And you can also say at that point whether that blocks them completely from going any further, or if it just generates a warning. So it'll display a warning on the screen, but by default it doesn't display an email. But we can very easily configure that. Yeah.
No further questions.
Okay. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, then let me just say thank you. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon. If you do have any questions, let me just flip back to these contact details. As I said, just definitely give either myself or Emma a ring. And if you're thinking about implementing a purchase-to-pay system, then please do give us a call. Or if you'd just like to know more about the Proactis product, again, we'd be very happy to demonstrate that for you on a one-to-one basis. So please drop us a line. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.